Good morning. Thank you everyone for coming here and for being prepared to listen to me. Thank you very much for the invitation to speak, which I'm really delighted to be here to certainly in aid of Women's Day, International Women's Day, and the events that are taking place over the next week. Now, I've been asked to talk about my experience as a woman, and I suppose a senior woman, how it is that I've managed to negotiate the system, and someone said how I've managed to break the glass ceiling. And I've been asked to talk about my reflections, any points that are important to me, and things that have occurred to me along the way. And in undertaking this exercise, I suppose that there are two things that occur to me. The first is that it's only having been asked to participate in these events and putting together my reflections that it has occurred to me that perhaps I am a senior woman in a leadership position. And perhaps, I don't know, I may have broken some glass ceiling, but it's never really occurred to me in that way, because all that I tend to do is to concentrate on doing the best possible job that I can do in any set of circumstances. And so, as you'll have gathered, I can't pinpoint a time when the ceiling broke. There wasn't any glass shattering anywhere, but all that's happened is that looking back over my career, it has occurred to me that perhaps things haven't gone too badly. And I suppose that the second point is that if any of you are waiting with pens poised to find out what the silver bullet for success is, I'm afraid you're going to be sorely disappointed. So I feel a bit of a fraud, I have to say. But all that I will talk about is the challenges of the jobs that I've faced, why it is that I've made the decisions that I have, and what has occurred to me along the way and what my personal contributions have been. And hopefully, at the end, I'll draw out some common themes and reflections, and also share with you some hard lessons that I've learned along the way. So, I'll deal with my career history, some of the roles that I've undertaken, and I'll take you on to my career so far. So, I'm a solicitor. I qualified as a solicitor, went to do my degree at university, did my solicitor's finals, and then qualified and went into private practice. And when I was in private practice, I was at a firm which specialised in childcare law and criminal law, and I remained there for 8 years, and after 5 years I was made a partner in the firm. And then in 2000 I joined the CPS Inspectorate, and I became a legal inspector. And as you might have gathered from the names, the CPS Inspectorate inspects the Crown Prosecution Service. And as such, for 3 years I had the privilege of travelling up and down the country, going to CPS offices and assessing their effectiveness and the quality of their casework. And then in 2003 I became the sector director for initially the North and East London sector, and then ultimately, following a restructure, for the whole of North London. And so I was responsible for virtually all of the prosecutions in North London, the 17 boroughs that made up North London, 17 of the 33 London boroughs. And we dealt with everything from shoplifting right through to rape and murder and everything in between. And then in 2009, I believe it was, I was appointed as the Chief Crown Prosecutor for CPS North East, and there I was responsible for virtually all of the prosecutions in Northumbria, Cleveland and Durham. And I don't know if any of you remember the case involving Raoul Moat. If you do, then I was the Chief Crown Prosecutor at the time when unfortunately Raoul Moat committed the awful offences that he did. And I have to say that I was not subject to the scrutiny that the Chief Constable of Northumbria was subject to, and a very difficult time it was for her too. But what I can say is that we were responsible for prosecuting Raoul Moat's accomplices, and had we been unsuccessful, I'm sure that the implications would have been very serious and far-reaching indeed. Then I had a period in 2014 as the Chief Crown Prosecutor for CPS Direct. And CPS Direct, for those of you who don't know, is an out-of-hours, 24-hour legal advice process system for the police, and gave the police advice as to whether or not to charge individuals. And it's subject to very stringent performance targets. And so it was a very sort of challenging period there. And currently, since 2015, I've been Her Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary for HMIC. It's a bit of a mouthful, so it's one to get your teeth around. And in my current role, I'm responsible for inspecting 13 of the 43 forces in England and Wales. So I shall come back to the role, but all I'd say at this stage is that my current role is quite interesting, because never more so than now has there been, I think, more scrutiny of policing and of the police service. And I do feel that I have an important responsibility to be alive to that scrutiny, and it's important for us to be fair, measured and independent in our judgments. Now, in my current role, I just say that I'm also required to provide advice to ministers and officials, and those discussions can influence policy decisions. But given my background, being from South London, there are occasions when I sit there in these high lofty meetings and think, you know, you mustn't think this, but you know, I'm from South London, what do I do here? So it can be quite interesting at times. So, to my career choices, what I'll do is just go back over a couple of my roles and pick out some of the reasons for the choices that I've made. And as I've only got a few minutes, I won't be pleased to know, I won't go through every single role that I have. But let's talk about the CPS Inspectorate. Why did I join the CPS Inspectorate? Well, the reason why I did so was because I genuinely thought that I could help the CPS improve. And I don't want that to sound lofty, because it isn't intended to at all. But when I was in private practice, there were occasions where I'd go along to court and the CPS weren't ready and they didn't have their files, and I'd be really frustrated. And so when the jobs were advertised, I thought, well, you know, you might be able to make a real difference. And so that was the reason for my applying. And it was quite an important step for me. I actually loved the job. I did see it as I have seen all my roles, I saw it as a privilege to be able to undertake that role. I was the first person to be appointed who had never previously either prosecuted for the CPS or prosecuted for any other organisation. And so it marked a departure as far as the organisation was concerned. And in undertaking the role, what I realised was that it is a very, very challenging role, prosecuting, And given that they deal with in excess of 1 million cases a year, the sheer volume of the operation can actually be quite a challenge. And I have to say that my respect for the organisation grew immeasurably as a result of that experience. But what did I gain from that experience? Well, I'd say that I developed the ability to deliver what were sometimes difficult messages to senior people in what can be quite a pressurised situation. And in circumstances where I had to establish my credibility very, very quickly, bearing in mind, as I'd said earlier, that I had never previously prosecuted. And I also learnt more about communication, because when you're a solicitor in private practice, your principal relationship is with your client. And I think that was a useful grounding for me, because it is important to establish a rapport very quickly. And I also did have to deal with senior leaders in the organisation, many of whom were much more senior than I was, and so I had to be prepared to stand my ground and to base whatever judgments I made on evidence. And I think that's something that has really followed me throughout my career. So then we come to CPS London. Why did I apply for the job at CPS London? I could have stayed at the CPS Inspectorate. I spent 3 marvellous years there, and as I've said, thoroughly enjoyed it. And I still come across people all these years later with whom I worked in 2000, between 2000 and 2003. They're still working for the CPS Inspectorate, they're still enjoying it, and I could have stayed because I certainly did enjoy it myself. So why leave? Well, I think there are a couple of reasons. The first was that my boss at the time, who was the Chief Inspector of the CPS, he was very encouraging, and I think this is a feature of my career. I've been fortunate enough to have people who have been encouraging, they've given their time, they've given their efforts, they didn't have to, and they assisted. And what he did in this particular instance was he told me that the role had been advertised, and he encouraged me to apply for it. He was very supportive, and I recall him saying to me, "Right, Wendy, draft your application and then get some time in the diary, we'll sit down and we'll go through your application with you." And I remember I did that, spent quite a long time on it, and I sat down with him, and he looked at me and he said, "It needs some work." And I remember, thinking, oh gosh, because I'd spent all this time on it. But he took me through matters, and he really helped me, didn't have to do it. And so I did it again and submitted it, and I was appointed. But there was also another reason why I applied, which was the Chief Crown Prosecutor for London, who was ultimately to become my boss. She said to me, "Well, Wendy, you've spent all this time inspecting and telling us what to do. Why don't you do it yourself? Why don't you come and show us how it's done?" So it was quite a challenge. In fact, it was a huge challenge. And actually, it's fair to say that there were times when I felt a bit like this. Yeah, quite a challenge. I went from a relatively small organisation to an organisation where I was leading 450 staff, and following a restructure it was 550 staff, and we had, I think it was over 200 of our staff were lawyers, more than 70 of them were managers. We prosecuted, I think it was in excess of 90,000 cases a year. We were responsible for prosecutions in 17 magistrates' courts, and I think it was 3 or 4 Crown Courts, one of which was Snaresbrook Crown Court, which, for those of you who are interested, is the largest Crown Court in Western Europe. And also the performance of London wasn't where it needed to be. And so I saw my role as being to improve performance and also to improve morale. And yes, I'd been a partner in a firm, but the organisation was much more complex and really a different size, and so it was quite a challenge. So what did I do? Well, I got to grips with the business very quickly indeed. I think I was helped by virtue of the fact that I'd had the inspection experience, so I had an understanding of what perhaps some of the issues were. I went out, I got a caseload, I prosecuted cases at court, no doubt very badly, and met as many members of staff as I could. And actually that was a feature. We had members of staff who at the time were located in each of the firstly 13 and then 17 London boroughs, but I made a point of meeting them regularly and also engaging with our managers. And when I did have those meetings, I explained very clearly why it was that we were going through the change programme that we were at the time, what it was that they could expect of me, what it was that I needed from them, and also I gained an understanding of how my decisions could affect them in their everyday lives. And I think that that contact with the impact of your decisions is absolutely key if you're going to make any progress. The other aspect that I learnt from that experience was the importance of managing through others, because if you've got an organisation and it comprises, let's say, 20 people that you can get into a room all together at the same time, then that's great. Short lines of communication, you can speak directly to your colleagues and they can be absolutely clear about what you stand for and what you want to achieve, and you can have that two-way dialogue. Now, of course, the minute that you lose that intimacy, the minute that an organisation gets larger, it becomes more difficult to establish that relationship. And so the importance of investing in your managers, investing in your leaders, making sure that your junior leaders are encouraged, that they are able to progress, that I think was what was important to me. And really prizing your management team, because, and this is also a common theme for me, you can't do it on your own. So I dedicated quite a lot of time to the management team. Hopefully I did develop them, and hopefully I was very clear about what we needed to achieve. Now, I didn't always get it right. In fact, as I'm speaking to you, I'm thinking of a couple of spectacular examples where I got it wrong. But I'd like to think that hopefully I got it right enough of the time, because the majority of my staff and managers were actually quite positive. And in fact, they did say that I brought a relentless focus to performance, which I don't think was a criticism. I'd like to think that that was a compliment, because what they did say was that when you do have that focus on what it is that you're doing, and you can see that you're getting better at it and improving, that in and of itself builds your confidence. It also builds your belief and it builds your pride, not only in yourself, but also in your organisation. So then, CPS North East, conscious of the time, when I went to the North East, it was a challenging time. I've spoken about my my professional challenges in CPS London. I had not only professional challenges, but also personal challenges when I went to the North East, because in addition to being promoted, and you really do recognise that the buck stops here, it doesn't go anywhere else, when you head up the organisation. It was also quite a move for me because, as I've indicated, I am from South London, and I had never been to the North East, and so it was a big move for me. But I was actually delighted to go there because the staff had, I mean, there was a different approach in that in London we had quite a high turnover of staff. There were people who, left the organisation quite regularly. That was very different in the North East. There was a low turnover, and that brings with it both benefits, but also it can bring with it some other aspects. So the benefits were that I had a really experienced workforce who took pride in their work and in their achievements. But the flip side of that is that you're perhaps more averse to change and more set in terms of this is how it's done. So it was a challenge. The other point being that in 2009 that marked the onset of austerity, financial and resource constraint. I had previously been used to being a leader in organisations where the only question was how much our budget was going to increase. Not whether it was going to increase, how much it was going to increase by. And then I found that come 2009, because that's when the austerity measures kicked in, it no longer became a case or a question of how much the increase was going to be. It became a question of how much the saving was going to be. And that changed my approach, and actually we had to change the approach in the organisation. And the CPS was, in keeping with other public organisations, it was in need of a radical change if it was going to be able to make peace with those challenges. So what did we do? In the North East we went from 12 offices down to 2 offices, and over the period that I was there we saved, and it was 22% of our budget. And to do that, we had to change the culture. And so what I'd like to think that when I left, the organisation was certainly regarded as a can-do area. If the organisation wanted to pilot anything, they came to the North East because they knew that we would give it a fair run, and frankly, if we couldn't make it work, nobody could make it work. So I'd like to think that that was a positive aspect. And I'd just like to talk a little bit about CPS Direct, simply to say that that was a very different challenge again, because as it's a 24-hour service, I had members of staff who worked from home, who worked in every one of the CPS offices around England and Wales, around the country. And that in itself can make it quite difficult for you to build a sense of a team, especially if you're taking a call at 2 o'clock in the morning and you've got an officer who's arrested someone on suspicion of GBH, and it's a really tough and difficult case that you have to advise on. The temptation must be, oh my goodness, this is so difficult, and I think I'll just put the phone down and say that the call didn't get through. But they didn't do that. Our staff did not do that, and so I think that there was a responsibility to build that sense of a team, and hopefully that was what I did. And that takes me to my current role, where I do find myself having contact with chief constables, with police and crime commissioners, and I see that Martin's at the back of the room. I hadn't realised you were going to be here, and Home Office officials and others, ministers and so on. And I mentioned earlier the importance of our role being to fairly explain how it is that forces do because of that public scrutiny. And I think that's certainly the position that is important to me and that I'm very much alive to. So, to to conclude, in drawing all of this, all of my experience together, I return to where I started really by saying that as far as my experiences are concerned, there certainly is no silver bullet, or if there is, I haven't found it. But I think it's probably fair to say that over the course of my my roles, I brought about changes. Some of them have been extremely difficult, some of them have been extremely challenging, all of them have been enjoyable. And there have been some emerging themes that have come through time and again, and which I'd like to share with you in closing. But again, I have to apologise for none of these points being particularly original, and you will no doubt have heard these things said previously. The use of the term vision and values is perhaps a bit of a hackneyed term, and I hesitated because I hesitated before noting it in this presentation. But I can't think of any other term that encapsulates what it is that I'm trying to say, which is, if you're going to set out to do anything at all, you have to be very clear about what it is that you intend to do and what it is that you want your organisation to do. So what's your role going to be, and what is the end state that you want your organisation to end up in? And also, what sort of organisation do you want to lead? The fantastic thing about being in a leadership position, and by the way, that's whether you're heading up a team or whether you're a chief executive of an organisation, the fantastic thing is that you get to set the tone. You get to set the culture, because you can set the culture that you want your organisation to espouse. And that's where the values of the individual come into play. What sort of organisation do you want to set or to lead? What sort of values are important to you? Is it important to you to be compassionate, to be professional, to be passionate, to be respectful, to be, and on it goes? If it is, then take the opportunity and really make your stamp. And also, what is it that you want your organisation to achieve? Understanding and defining that end state and being very clear in your own visualisation of how it's going to be achieved, I think, is important. So whether it's that you want to demonstrate the best possible customer care, whether it's that you want to demonstrate and model exemplary victim service, whatever it is, be very clear about what it is that you want to achieve. I was very clear and used every opportunity with my staff and managers to articulate, what it was that we wanted to achieve, so that they could really fasten behind that particular vision and get on board with it. What I mean by understanding the business is work hard. I mean, many of you are students, and others of you will be aspiring to achieve more senior ranks and grades. So hard work is nothing new to anyone in this room. So perhaps it doesn't need saying, but I think it does. Be prepared to put in the extra work, do the hard yards, go that extra mile, learn the business if you need to learn the business, understand the business if you need to. If you don't, then be the best that you possibly can at that particular time, because that's how your contribution really will make a difference. And also speak to your team, speak to your staff, learn from your staff. and learn from your team. I've mentioned that I'm responsible for inspecting police forces, but I've never been a police officer. And so I regarded it as my responsibility to get out to the forces that are on my region. And so I've done night shifts with officers who are on patrol. I've been in response vehicles. I've gone out to people's houses with response officers, some of whom have been the victims of really awful crimes. I've spoken to officers, you know, during their periods on duty, and also as part of our inspections, to find out from them what some of the challenges are that they face. I've seen child protection team members who are dealing with some of the most harrowing cases, and I've spoken to those officers. I regard that as my responsibility to gain an understanding. So that's what I mean about understanding the business. I think it does, it is important to be able to communicate on different levels, depending on who it is that you're talking to, in a way that people feel they can really identify with the message that you're trying to convey. And also, that gives you an opportunity to demonstrate who you are, because it's only by people finding out who you are that they will decide whether or not they want to be influenced by you, or indeed be led by you. So I think for me it's important to be genuine, to have integrity, and to demonstrate that. So it's not just about delivering a message. It's about doing so with passion and with belief, because if you don't believe it, nobody else is going to. And I've mentioned empathy, I've mentioned it a few times. It's for me about understanding the impact of your decisions and your activity, and being able to walk in another person's shoes, because by being able to do so, hopefully that will lead to your making ethical and effective decisions. Authenticity is also important. I would hope that I'm quite straightforward, and that's what I look for in others. And also, I'm a bit different, and I don't just mean that in terms of my appearance, obvious though that is. I'm a bit different in terms of how it is that I process information, how it is that I see things, but I'm not afraid to ask the many, many silly questions, because that's how you understand things, and sometimes by questioning things you might actually bring about a change. So I think it's important for me to have that authenticity, but also to look for that difference in approach from others. And I've mentioned release, relief and positivity, by which I mean I've found it essential to have some sort of release, whether it's, you know, that you go home and kick the cat, please don't kick the cat, by the way, or that, you know, you sound off to your family or your friends or, you know, your loved ones, or you go up mountains, or that enables you to get up and to go on, and the next day to do what you need to do, and to continue to do what you need to do. I have a particular friend whose name is Grace, and Grace is my sounding board, and so she is my particular release. I do think that networking is also important, because again, you get the opportunity to share experiences with peers, and that can have a significant impact. Linked to what I've been saying, there's something about resilience in undertaking senior roles. I went through a period of time where I thought, why is it that I never get an easy day? And there was a degree of, you know, it's not fair. Why is it that every day that I go in there is some sort of issue? what I realised was that that's just what you're there to do. The more senior you are in an organisation, nobody's going to give you the easy stuff to do. If you're senior in an organisation, they are giving you the stuff because that's your role. And I think once you make peace with the fact that it's a hard job, that's what goes with the territory, I think that makes things easier. But with that realisation comes the need for resilience. And so it does, if you're going to be resilient, you have to empower others, because by empowering others, they will work with you to solve those seemingly intractable problems. You know, they will have the answers, because I guarantee you won't have all the answers, whoever you are in this room. And it's only if people are prepared to give you their best that will result in positive results. So I think that the empowerment piece is quite important. Value the team. That's what I'll end by saying. No one can do this on their own. If you think that you are some great leader and that you are an island, that simply is not going to happen. A friend of mine heard a radio programme who said, and the person said, if you think that you're this great leader and you stride out and you try new challenges, but when you look behind you, there's nobody behind you, that's not leadership, that's going for a walk. And so remembering that it's important that your team are valued and that you respect difference. And the one thing that I haven't mentioned is respecting diversity. And the reason why I haven't mentioned it is because I just regard it as part of what I do. Every day, day in, day out. I think the very fact that I do what I do demonstrates that others have recognised the importance of difference. I continue to do the same. I regard it as my responsibility to do the same, but also to bring on the talents of others who hopefully will, in the same way that people have invested in me, they will feel invested in, they will come on and they will do an even better job than I do in future. So those are my reflections. Thank you.